Greetings, everyone. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Stay a while and listen to the Gurubashi War. I think we've jumped forward maybe a year to 18 years before the Dark Portal. And in that year, I'm sure things have been building to the Gurubashi War because they probably weren't happy that someone came and dropped an atom bomb on their leader. And let's see how they react, they being the Gurubashi trolls. None of the Gurubashi who had witnessed Warlord Joknon's death survived, but it took little imagination for the trolls to guess who was responsible. The Gurubashi came together under the banner of the slain warlord's son, Zanon, and marched to war against Stormwind. It had been centuries since the Gurubashi tribes had fought as one, and the humans were utterly unprepared for their fury. The trolls' numbers were frightening. Within days, Stormwind's southern defensive lines crumbled before the Gurubashi onslaught. Any civilians who could not escape were butchered in horrifying ways, their teeth, bones, and ears taken as trophies. Gross. But that's not as PG as Warcraft is. They're not above taking off an ear and collecting those. The Gurubashi's objective was clear. Burn Stormwind City to the ground. King Barathan recalled all forces to the stronghold's gates. His kingdom's survival would depend on one colossal battle. As the Gurubashi warbands approached, Lane told his father what he and his friends had done in Stranglethorn. Barathan was more disappointed than angry at his son. He did not punish the three young men. There was no need. The trolls would see to that soon enough. Yeah, so the dad, you can't argue whether he was right or wrong, but the son was definitely wrong. It made things way worse. When the Gurubashi arrived at the city walls, the soldiers of Stormwind trembled at the trolls' numbers. Zanon had learned some of his father's forbidden tricks. He'd used them to transform a few Gurubashi into hulking berserkers possessed of otherworldly strength. And that's a thing that you see. I don't know how soon that starts appearing. By the time there's BFA, it's definitely there. Those big giant trolls that have the big tusks. These mutated giants climbed Stormwind's walls and proceeded to rip its soldiers to pieces. The death toll on both sides mounted quickly. King Barathan knew that it would take a miracle to break the Gurubashi siege, so the old leader mounted a desperate counterattack with his personal guards. He stormed directly into the hellish front lines, seeking Zanon's head. He almost succeeded, but the odds were against him. King Barathan died on the field of battle. Now Lane is the king, and I believe he is king when we start Orcs and Humans, so we're getting closer. Lane mourned his father's death, overcome with guilt about his foolish mission into Stranglethorn. Yet he knew that the city was now looking to him for guidance. Stormwind's forces had fallen into disarray. All seemed lost. Lane pleaded with Medivh to unleash his power as he had done before, believing it was the only way to spare the city. Medivh agreed. The thought of calling on his full might frightened him, but in a strange way, it also excited him. He stood upon Stormwind City's ramparts and rained fire and ice upon the Gurubashi. He froze them in their tracks. He incinerated them from within. He blasted them to pieces with pure arcane force. He's a triple spec. He can do it all. Their screams of pain drowned out the sounds of battle. That's what's the coolest about these heroes, and as much as they want to call you the hero in every single expansion, it's like Jaina Proudmoore and Medivh and stuff that are really the coolest because they're legitimately they're expecting everything. They can do everything, which would be so cool if you could somehow just play around and do that. Medivh soon realized that he was making sure their deaths were excruciating. He was even more horrified to discover that he enjoyed it. When Medivh called off his arcane barrage, Stormwind City still stood. The Gurubashi and their leader were dead. Only a handful of trolls had escaped the maelstrom of magic. The people of Stormwind mourned their dead and lauded their heroes. Medivh was seen as the realm's greatest defender. The kingdom welcomed Lane Rin as its new ruler. When Anduin Lothar was raised as one of the military's top commanders, there was nothing but approval from the citizens. Okay, so King Lane Rin is the king now, and Lothar is his number one, and Medivh is a hero. He's the guardian. I wonder if Jaina Proudmoore's a guardian. I just don't know about that. The secret mission that had sparked the war was not known to the public, but the consequences of it weighed heavily upon Medivh and his friends. Many innocents had died due to their recklessness, so they're all getting touted as heroes, and it's all their fault. Medivh understood that he did not have the will, the mental fortitude to control his guardian birthright. The woman in his dreams continued beckoning to him to Karazhan in order to refine his powers. He now obeyed her. He was too terrified of what he might do if he didn't. Stormwind's isolation. Baratheon made no attempt to call on the northern human nations for help against the Gurubashi. The trolls were moving so quickly that reinforcements would never arrive in time. Yet even under different circumstances, the king would have been loath to ask for aid. Years ago, Stormwind had requested assistance from the other human nations to fend off attacks by gnolls, but it had received none. Yeah, that's in the last book. The very end of it. Ever since then, Baratheon and his people had become more isolationist, believing that they could deal with any threat on their own. And I think that still extends. That's why we're only slow. I mean, I do think you get a little bit of help in Warcraft 2, but definitely not from Lordaeron. And the Kultirans really don't come around and join the Alliance until BFA. They might send some ships or something. But there's a couple others that do help out that we will read about, that will play in these first couple wars. And if they keep the Guardian Medivh with them, they can deal with any threat on their own. And ultimately, I guess they kind of will. And this is a picture we have of Medivh. Look at that weird staff he has. I guess the sign of Stormwind is an eagle, so he's got that eagle staff. It says Medivh destroys the Gurubashi siege. He's just shocking lightning out there. Trying to look far below. I guess there's some like mingling Stormwind forces with some possible trolls, but it's real minimal. It's just about Medivh unleashing his power. Cool. Another episode in the pipes, side by side. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lore of Warcraft.